If I had to summarize the March 2026 real estate market in Ottawa, I would characterize it like this: more listings, more days on market, and a market that for the first time in years is actually giving buyers some room to breathe and negotiate. The March 2026 numbers are in, and while the prices are holding steady in the single family home section of the market, what's happening underneath the surface tells a very different story than what we saw 12 months ago. The balance of power between buyers and sellers is shifting. And if you're thinking about making a move this spring, it's important that you understand what that means for you as a buyer and as a seller. Today, we're going to break down what's going on in the market overall, as well as take a closer look at that single family section of the Ottawa market. Let's get into it. Now, the first thing I always look at here is the number of sales that happened in the market overall. How many properties actually changed hands? And we're going to compare this to every March over the last 10 years. So we're comparing kind of apples to apples. If we're comparing a March to a January, that doesn't make a ton of sense, really. It doesn't really tell us anything. But what we can see here is we have the 10-year average for all the Marches since 2017 sitting at 1,261 sales. And since 2023, we have been pretty well below that mark. Now, the only year that was lower than this year was 2023 itself, which was after the market kind of corrected when the interest rates went up after the craziness of 2021 and 22. And we saw a modest recovery into 2024, 2025 before dropping off a little bit again this year. So we're back on that kind of downward trajectory. This was quite a slow March overall if we're looking at overall sales in the market. Now, this is a lot of the same information, but we're just looking at it in context of the last couple of years. And we can see that as far as seasonality goes, we're actually kind of on trend here. So we're not too far below 2024 and 2025. And we can definitely expect that sales number to increase as we go into April, May, June, which are usually the months where number of sales peaks out for the year. So what I'll be looking to see over the next couple months is whether or not this line crosses and exceeds the last couple of years. That would be a positive sign. What I expect is we'll probably stay kind of on trend here, just a little bit below the last couple of years. And depending on how things go geopolitically and with the economy and that sort of thing, it wouldn't blow my mind if we saw this stay even a little bit or diverge even a little bit more from the last couple of years. But time will really tell. There's a lot of factors that we don't really have control over that are going to determine how many sales happen in the Ottawa market this year. Now, this is the number of listings that's sitting on the market at the end of the month for every March for the last 10 years. And we covered this last month, so I won't go too in depth, but 2017, 2018 was, we had tons of inventory, dropped during the craziness of 2021 and 2022 in like the peak pandemic years. And then since then, at the end of March, the number of listings sitting on the market at the end of the month has steadily climbed, and that trend continued this year. We're actually back up above where we were in 2018. So that's something that's worth paying attention to. It means that there's listings hitting the market, but the listings that are hitting the market are not selling at the rate that they need to keep that inventory under control. And that segues well into our next slide here, which is months of inventory. So if you've been watching the channel regularly, you know that months of inventory is one of the best statistics, in my opinion. It's the best leading indicator as to where the market is going directionally. And the way we get months of inventory is we take the number of listings that are sitting on the market at the end of the month, so that chart we just looked at, and we divide it by the number of sales, which was the first chart we looked at. And that gives us, hypothetically, how long it would take to completely sell out of inventory if we were to stop listing homes like at that point. And it gives us a good measure of absorption. So if the months of inventory is high, it means the market is pretty slow. And if it's lower, it means the market is fairly hot. So it's a little bit deceptive given how the direction the market is going, but we're technically still in a seller's market. Anything below 4 months of inventory is considered a seller's market, but it's important to look at where things are going directionally. Now you can see the months of inventory has gone down a little bit since January, February, which is pretty normal. But compared to March of last year, we're actually up a little bit. And I would say that's reflective of what's actually happening. What's hiding underneath this too, which we're going to drill into in the next couple slides, is very different things are happening in different sections of the market. Like, bear in mind, this is for the market overall. But that's where we're sitting right now for months of inventory. So now we're going to start looking at the individual sections of the market. So we're going to start with single family, and I'm going to cover single family in this video. I've done condos already, and townhouses is going to be coming in the next week or so. So if you're interested in seeing what's going on in those sections of the market, check out that other video or get subscribed to be notified when those videos come out. So for single families here, you can see we're actually trending pretty similar to the market overall. We had a really busy 2021 and 2022 before things dropped off in 2023, recovered a little the last couple of years. And we actually do have a few more single family sales this year than last year. So we can already see that the single family market is diverging a little bit from the market overall, which indicates that the other sections of the market, the condos and that sort of thing, are dragging the market down. Spoiler, that is what's happening. Here we are again. So this was really interesting to see. So single family sales are actually better than they have been both of the last couple of years. So that wasn't the case to start the year off. We actually saw like a pretty big divergence in February here. Like it looked like the single family market might really slow down. But to me, this is an example of why January and February stats, we shouldn't put too much stake in them. There's not a ton of property generally changing hands in that part of the year. So this is actually encouraging for the single family market. We're seeing more of those types of properties sell. And again, the number of listings of single family homes, this is just what we're looking at so far this year. We can see as the months go on, we have more inventory sitting on the market at the end of the month. Fortunately, in this case, the sales are keeping up enough that it's keeping the inventory more under control than the market in general and the condo market. Just added some extra information here for more to look at. The list to sales price ratio is 98% for single family homes right now, which means that on average from the list price, the final list price that the seller puts up, on average, the buyer is able to negotiate themselves 2% off of that list price. And months of inventory, again, you'll notice that this is lower in both cases than the market overall. So single family homes are trading pretty well. And we can see that compared to March 2025, it's actually gone down a little bit. So we have even fewer months of inventory. Things are moving even faster than they were in 2025. And this really bucks the trend of the market overall. And that puts us firmly in seller's market territory still, because again, anything under that 4 months is a seller's market. The average days on market is something I like to drill into for each individual property type too. And we can see here, we started with a very high months of inventory for single family, got a little bit closer together in February, but then started to diverge again. So really interesting that we're seeing more sales happen in the single family market, but we're also seeing more properties kind of sit on the market for a little bit longer as well. So they're selling a lot of the time, but it's taking longer on average for those properties to sell than it was last year. This orange line is 2025, by the way. And lastly, we have to take a look at the benchmark price. So I always like to leave the peak in early 2022 here just to remind us of where we've been and where we are now in comparison. But what I really want to zoom in on here is how things have changed over the last year and over the last month. So year over year, we saw a decrease in prices overall of 2.2%, which overall, given how slow the market's been in general, is not disastrous. It's actually a little bit less of a decline than I was expecting to see. And month over month, we saw a modest increase of 0.7%. So another thing I'll mention here is I see stuff sometimes saying that like, oh, things are up month over month, like things are really kicking off. And while that's true, like we are moving into that more traditionally busy time of the year, it's important to put it in context and look at where we are compared to previous years. Because if you're comparing a March or an April to a January or February, it would be bizarre to not see an increase in the number of prices, number of sales, that kind of thing. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples when you're trying to get a feel for what the market is doing. So what this means for you is if you're looking to buy a single family home right now, you'll definitely be able to get a better price than you would have a few years ago. Prices have come down a little bit compared to last year, but it's still relatively brisk compared to the other sections of the market. Surprisingly so, in my opinion. If you go back and look at the condo video that I did a couple days ago, you'll see what I mean about the difference between these sections of the market. If you're somebody who's looking to sell a single family home now, it's definitely very possible to do it. You just have to make sure you're priced well, make sure you have good marketing, good photos, and are able to stand out compared to the other competition on your neighborhood, on your street, in order to be able to sell in a reasonable amount of time, because we do see that compared to last year, even though more stuff is selling, the days on market is creeping up. So you don't want to be one of those people stuck on the market for 60, 90 days and you get buyers asking like, what's wrong with this place? Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next week for the townhouse update. Take care.